Wikisana is also a good channel to follow our conversations further.
Dear viewers, thank you for taking the time for today's show. Visit, it's nice. It's a very, I don't know how to put it, but I don't feel anonymous at all. I already know so many people, and I'm sitting in your living room in thoughts, and we're discussing things, or I'm allowed to discuss them with you. I got the emails, and thank you for letting me get to know many of you. And I'm always happy to be able to organize this show. Now I have a request, and I would like to be able to read it out a little bit. Because it's about yesterday, I was at my practical doctor's office and asked to get a high-dose vitamin C infusion. The answer was a lecture. Where would I have read that again? And that's just a money-making business. And I'm supposed to eat potatoes. My story is that I had a breast tumor in 2019. At the time, I had chemotherapy, breast-retaining measures, and radiation. During this year's checkup, a change was found in the image on the scar. And the samples of the biopsy were negative. An open biopsy and removal of a lymph node were suggested. I didn't agree with that, and yet a stent biopsy was done with the result negative. A checkup in about 4 months was negotiated. I don't want to do this one either. My question about an alternative treatment was only laughed at. She even said which alternative treatment. My husband has a finding of prostate tumor for several years, and he can handle this one quite well with tamoxifen. And he gets Pamorlin every quarter of a year. These are hormone injections. Thank you very much for this email. I chose you because you make something very, very clear in medicine. Which also makes me very sad. Because you are now a very conscious patient. You want to understand it. You look for your interlocutors. You have questions and want to answer them. And this is a bad incompetence of expertise. That means if you as a doctor don't know anything about high-dose vitamin C, then it's not bad at all. Because you may have not dealt with these things in your life. As a practical doctor, you are of course also in an education cycle, which does not integrate all these things in any way. And getting knowledge or having the desire to expand your knowledge would now mean, as a doctor of trust, that it is interesting. I like to deal with this for you because I don't know anything about it. But it is not up to you to hold a lecture as an ignorant person and to suggest something to you, to have read something. Of course, I've had a lot of headwinds in my years. And at some point there came a time when the others clearly saw their limits. We also have our limits. But then we have the other colleagues and specialists with whom we work together. It's not a question at all. It's human greatness to show weakness. But it is important that there is a clientele of people today that is growing, that is becoming more aware, like you, that you are broadcasting such programs. Many others too. Of course, high literature is available today, and of course wants to move on in life. Also understood that a disease that was operated on in 2019 and then of course with the full program still has effects for immunity over the years. And that mindfulness and of course also vigilance are very, very valuable. You can say a very warm greeting to the colleague that we are today in the context of the high cytotoxicity. Cyto is the cell and toxic means tumor destroying. Vitamin C has been used with an incredible success rate for many years. That means this water-soluble vitamin, which you can take in the form of ascorbic acid or also in oral form, you can actually not more than 2,000 milligrams, i.e. 2 grams, maybe a maximum of 3 grams. The body would eliminate the excess unhindered. But that does not affect a patient like you now. You now need a therapy that is able to act cytotoxically if the immunity is not yet out of the knowledge. And you need 0.5 grams per kilogram. That means if you now weigh 60 kilos, then that's 120, or just always take double the number. To the gram weight. That means if you are now in a situation where you can puff up to 60, 70, 80 grams of vitamin C, then this is possible with an experienced therapist, without question. I don't have any possibilities now to estimate how much you need because I don't know your body structure and size. And because I don't know to what extent the enzyme that breaks down vitamin C is able to do this, glucose 6-phosphate dehydrogenase, that must be present in a sufficient strength in everyone. If it is not there, then there is a contraindication, because a high vitamin C in this high dose then provokes kidney stones. I would actually like to teach you in the sense that many people develop completely different complaints. And vitamin C has a strong oxidative effect, but also someone who significantly improves the quality of life, who, on the other hand, can often be combined with chemotherapy, because this also reduces the toxicity of a chemotherapy, which acts in such a way that it does not directly attack the tumor, but also healthy cells, that these healthy cells are significantly protected by vitamin C. As a result, you can sometimes go down with the dose of chemotherapy. This can also target radiation amplification, which can also be improved the therapy. That means, as a low-dose addition, as we should actually all do now in the winter months, vitamin C as an antioxidant is of course incredibly important, but pro-oxidative and thus very cytotoxic due to the peroxide formation. This has to do with the fact that there is a development of hydrogen peroxide around the cell, and the moment it is diffused into the tumor cell, it then, of course, also damages the cell membrane and has an impact on the glucose metabolism. We know today, or rather not today, we know since 1930, that Warburg already told us back then that the tumor metabolism needs 18 times more glucose. This means a really strong low-carb diet, but I think you will know such things, which is, of course, of great importance. Johannes Koh has written a beautiful book on the anti-tumor diet. Perhaps the recipes are sometimes a bit insensitive, but in this book he has explained very well how important the low-carb diet is in the case of any tumor. I can only appeal to you to get a good grasp on the changes that are taking place there. I also find it very nice that you have rejected a lymph node extubation. The Mindtrack lab in Bayreuth with Professor Pachmann is conducting a test on circulating epithelial tumor cells. This is a very necessary test for me because a lot of women, for example, have had their breasts operated, removed the tumor, but then no radiation, no chemotherapy. We always need good parameters to see whether we need to change our anti-tumor therapy, whether it is well adapted. It all has to do with whether the immune system is ready for it. Vitamin D is, of course, incredibly important to include here, and I think you should perhaps look for a partner with an oncologist, not directly, but with a complementary physician who is very specialized on this level. Actually look for a partner who understands you. And who is perhaps trying to do things that you ask for, who is trying to be able to do it for you. I have experienced this all my life, that people often came up with valuable thoughts, that people came up with questions that interested me because they knew more than I did. And the success that people have with this therapy gives them the right, regardless of whether it is something that I don't know before or whether it is something that I can get to know through it. There is actually no black and white thinking in medicine. And above all, what you should never do is to choose a therapy that corresponds to the guidelines. We now call them D-guidelines. And we need the focus on the person. We need an honest record of existence, which, of course, knocks off a lot of things at the moment, and not only has the external finding or the local finding in view, but now also the whole event. And in your email, you ask me about alternative treatment with chlorine dioxide. I can only support that. We know that tumor treatment or tumor development and the background of bacterial parasitic stress are still light years away in medicine. And yet we see that these things have to be looked at and diagnosed in order to integrate a clear therapy here. Today we say that biological tumor therapy is actually necessary for the whole life. A lymphocytic typification test or a therapist who is trained in microimmune therapy can help you a lot because we check all immune parameters to see how we can modulate the immune system. It's not about strengthening it here. It's not about slowing it down there. You would create an imbalance at that moment. And that's why it's always about the modulations. You can, for example, use microimmune therapy wonderfully as a balancing force at that moment. The more we understand about the immune system, the more we understand that we hardly understand anything by now. That may be a bit dramatic now, but the more we do, and the knowledge about the immune system is running at full speed here, that we are full of humility towards it and say, where does the body actually get this logistics from? We are here in a really tough hierarchy of order, and I think of priorities. Because he always keeps them to himself, and also that he has to resort to certain things within the framework of immunity. If you have vitamin D too low, the natural killer cells can't attack the tumor cells. And so, there are actually a lot of things you can do. I can only ask the colleagues to take an interest in these things and to kindly turn to an experienced therapist for the knowledge they need. But they are on the right track. Finally, I would like to say to your husband that the prostate tumor event is a lot, I would say, or a completely different thing. For him, too, the indications for low-carb diet are valid, but dramatic. And here you can certainly achieve a certain reduction of testosterone through hormone therapy. But this, of course, creates an estrogen surplus, and he has to ask himself further questions because hormone therapies will not be possible forever. And we have already made several broadcasts about the prostate carcinoma. Maybe you are looking forward to seeing it. And yes, I hope I was able to give you a few valuable tips and hints. But at the end of the show, and there are still a few minutes left, I found in a very nice magazine, namely in the Tierwelt, which I have been subscribing to for about a year and a half, because I have two little ones of 4 and 6 years. And I think I would study biology again if I had the chance again, and I would also start a medical degree. Because I think you connect much more with your actual life. And you get the respect for a living being when you can deal with these life processes. And when I read that it is a very important hint for people who live with cats that they are not allowed to give them avocados. It's because this person in there can cause very strong heart and muscle damage, also gastrointestinal damage. That fat causes inflammation of the pancreas, and that is a very high burden for the cat. Onions can also have an almost fatal effect on cats because this sulfur attacks the red blood cells in the onions. Also leek or chives. Then chocolate has theobromine in it. As a result, the small ones can get muscle tremors, vomiting, and also have diarrhea. Or, for example, they are not allowed to eat grapes or raisins because of the oxalic acid. When I read that, I just thought that you would never give that to cats. Because you love them. And because you want to protect their lives. And because you want to keep them with you for a long time. And because it is not in the sense of the keeper to consciously give something to an animal from which you know that it will die or that it will get sick. And the many, many things that we try to heal medically are sometimes not so tangible for people in the great seriousness. maybe because they don't die right away. But they always have to be aware that the things that happen in an organism, even in a human organism, are not evolutionarily aimed at it. We made a show about trans fats. We made a show about the whole overconsumption of sugar. We talk about smoking, but maybe smoking is not the biggest burner. It is also the completely civilized alcohol, the whole question of addictive substances. These are all attacks against life and against the human organism, which is embarrassed, beaten, and stressed. And at this point, I have to tell you that the dose is the poison. And I have to say this again with all clarity, because we live in a time where we have the chemtrails. If any person stands up and says that this is hocus pocus, then I have to tell him to measure your rainwater after he has seen chemtrails in the sky, if he even pays attention to it. People today no longer pay attention to life consciously. But all the environmental chemicals, all the fluorescent toothpastes, and I don't want to thematize this, are all things that quietly sabotage life piece by piece. And we don't have to get used to the fact that we are not vulnerable to these things in 2020. I just wanted to tell you again about this thought, this consideration, that you may become a little more aware in your shopping, in your dealing with what you give your children or grandchildren, whether it always has to be these sugar bears and gummy bears and Smarties at the checkout, or it may not even be a sticker or decals or finger painting colors, and they may paint the windows and mirrors at their grandmother's house, or whatever creativity is required. And time. The time we spend with the little ones is much more important than the fact that we always have to make sure that they also become sugar junkies with a dramatic, also quietly arising imbalance. And you should also have this feeling in you when you want to reach for it again and say, I wouldn't take the avocado for my cat either, because I know that I might lose it. In this sense, the thought came to me to see it from this perspective. Health is not a gift, but it is a task that we humans have. And we are all equipped with very different ways of tolerating things. But increasingly, the burden bubble is getting bigger and bigger, and at some point it will burst. But we see the impact of what is happening against life every day. And at that moment, I just felt the need to look at things here and there and to make it clear. Understanding means knowledge, and knowledge means understanding, and knowledge also means peace. And I think we all have it in our hands. We can decide about it, we can also make our own experiences, we can also take the consequences, but animals and children can't do that. And that's why my appeal to you all is to give the children a different life, and maybe buy things more carefully or just leave it and take other alternatives. Thank you very much for taking the time to participate in this format. Please feel free to send all your questions and letters to visite.qs24.tv. I am incredibly happy that this program has so many beautiful topics, maybe sometimes not so beautiful topics, but actually it should be just one thing to take you on this journey in the understanding of life. And if we all get more involved in this than we are doing now, everyone for themselves, then it can only become something good. Thank you very much and have a great week. Bye.